When I was about 10 years old, I had to go to speech therapy once a week. It was a bit outside of town. I would go there alone after school and my mom would pick me up later. One day, the following happened. Session is nearly over. Therapist leaves room and crosses the waiting room to get something from her bureau. Can't see the waiting room, but hear therapist talking to someone. "Oh, hello, we'll finish in a minute." Hear my mother's voice answering. "Fine, I'll wait." Therapist comes back, tells me that my mother is already waiting. Shortly afterwards, I go into the waiting room. My mom is nowhere to be seen. Wait for a while, check the toilets. No trace of my mother. Go down to the parking lot. Our car isn't there. Suddenly, our car drives up. My mother tells me that she's late because of a traffic jam. Who the hell did my therapist see and talk to in the waiting room? I visited family in Australia when I was a kid. My cousins had a neighbor that they thought was weird. I saw him out one day and got talking to him. He was loading rubbish bags into his car, so I helped him out. I didn't think he was weird or anything. We left Australia 2 days later. Fast forward 13 years later, and my cousins were visiting me. We got talking about their old house, and the topic of their neighbor came up. I mentioned how I didn't think he was weird and he seemed nice when I helped him with the bags. They were all just staring at me, looking shocked. I was like, what the fuck? It turns out, he was dumping his wife's body. It was actually 9/11 that day, so to everyone else, that's the whole Twin Towers thing, but to me, it's the day that I found out that I dragged a chopped up body around. Be me, 10 or so. Go to cousin's house to spend the night. There's the boys' room and the girls' room, which was only one female cousin. Hear her talking on my way back from the bathroom. She says, "Stop tickling me, you're gonna wake up my mom." She was talking to her doll. Maybe like 12 or 13. Doing some bullshit on the computer. I've been paranoid about ghosts in my room for a while. I'm conscious enough to know that it's just me being a stupid kid, but still freaked out. Sister, 6, waddles up to me. Just stands there without saying anything, assuming she's just watching me browse whatever the fuck it was I was browsing. Eventually, she speaks. "Anan, I think your room is haunted." What? Pause for like 10 seconds while I'm staring at her. She's looking not at me or the computer, seemingly at nothing. Finally, she speaks. "Huh? What did you say?" "I didn't say anything." Freaked me the fuck out, man. She was definitely too young to understand how to fuck with someone like that, too. Be me, be in 3rd or 4th grade. Mom just tucked me in for the night. I'm trying to fall asleep. Hear a little girl voice saying, "You know, Anan, you really should read more books." My bookshelf falls over. I scream. Mom comes in and comforts me. My mom had a poltergeist following her around since childhood. She grew up on a house built over a farm that had burned down, and the entire family died in it. Paranormal things would always happen around my mom, like dishes randomly flying out of the cabinet, and fans suddenly exploding. Here's another story that happened to my brother that's pretty dang spooky. Be my teenage brother about 11 or 12 years ago. I like to go down this one road rumored to be super haunted, with happenings like handprints on cars and faceless creatures at night. Finds a dead dog. Take a picture of the dog for whatever reason. Show it to his friend when he gets back to town. The picture is all staticky. Go back to the road the next day. The dog is completely decayed to the bone. The KKK was known to hold meetings on that road, and was rumored to sacrifice dogs and such. So, maybe that's what happened. Still spooky enough to be worth telling, though. Hey X, I've got something interesting enough to bring me out of lurking. I hope some of you can perhaps give me some insight as to what the hell I saw. I was just another 8 or 9-year-old kid living in Mormon land, Utah, wasting his summer vacation while life was still fun. Out behind my house, practically in my backyard, was a huge dike at the mouth of a canyon, coming from some nearby mountains. There was a drainage pipe that acted as an outlet for the little water that came down from the canyon at the base of the dike. Right above this big pile of accumulated sand was the perfect natural sandbox with the perfect natural garden hose, providing a constant steady trickle of water. It was easily visible from the back windows of my house, and this allowed for my mom to watch me play from within the house, and she would let me mess around all day. At the base of the pipe was a huge dinosaur nut and had a bunch of those nice, cool Carnegie collection models that a destructive kid like me should never have. Would take a bucket full of these out to the natural sandbox every day and would create little river systems and immerse myself in the anarchist society that I created for my dinosaurs, sitting out in the sun for hours and getting sunburned pretty much every day, and with a neighborhood kid who tolerated me. Did this on and off for the majority of the first half of the summer. Nostalgia, that's sad. In mid-July, as it happened every year, it started to rain more, and one night we got hit with a decent thunderstorm. Lay in bed that night, no doubt anticipating the new environment that I'd have to play in the next day. Got up at an hour which no doubt pissed off my parents, not bothering to wait for my friend, and headed right out to my little natural sandbox. A significant amount of water was coming out of the pipe, and a small pond had formed where I usually played. I played with my lake for about half an hour as the sun rose a little. It had to be about 7 or 8 in the morning. Was sticking dinosaur toys in the shallow mud and trying to balance them on pieces of floating wood debris when something floated next to my little hands. I went to push it away because it was on a collision course with one of my improvised boats, but I ended up recoiling. You know when you're a little kid and something startles you so badly that you don't scream, but you just kinda stare and retreat back a little with your heart jackhammering? That's what I did. The thing was about the size of a guinea pig. And I use an animal as a size comparison because it was definitely an organic thing, but it sure wasn't any animal or living thing I had ever seen or have ever seen since. It still freaks me out to think about. It floated in that low current region at the edge of the pool for a few seconds, and I got a decent look at the thing. It had that fatty pink-gray waterlogged color of something that's been dead and in water for a little while, but not yet falling apart. It had a head/torso from which trailed half a dozen or so tentacle-like things splayed out around in the water, and a couple dragged in the mud. It was hairless and didn't look like it had ever had hair, but it wasn't scaly either. And it had a fucking face. Not a human face, not even close, but a face. It reminded me slightly of the face of a pug or a bat. It was wrinkled and flat. It had a toothless, slack open mouth, and I could see one of its eyes, which was that dead custard color. Scared the fuck out of me so much that all childish desire to examine or poke it with a stick was gone. I quickly retreated back to my house and told my mom what I had seen. My mom seemed worried and even interested and accompanied me back so I could show her. By then, the current had carried it away, along with a couple of my dinosaurs, which was almost as upsetting as seeing the thing itself. We looked around and found one of the dinosaurs, but never found the thing. I was too nervous to play there for the next couple days, which worried my parents because I really loved playing out there, and they tried to convince me it was just a decaying dead animal. Eventually, I got over it and went on playing. A few years later, when I was 13 or 14, the whole incident came back to my mind, and I explored up the canyon to see if I could find anything, which I didn't. I never forgot seeing that thing, I know it could partially be explained away as a result of a creative childish mind, or that it really was the decomposed remains of something else. But I remember it very clearly, more clearly than any other childhood memories. And the thing was really clearly defined and seemed very whole. I had searched the internet for explanations and haven't found anything. I've even looked into cryptids and the like. The globsters kind of remind me of it, hence the pictures. But it was much, much more clearly composed. What the hell was it? My brother and I would play this game at night when our parents went out for a few hours. We would turn off all the lights in the house, have one of us hide, and the other would flail their arms and shake their head around, making grunting noise trying to kill the other. One night, I opened my door and noticed the lights were off, so I decided to try and sneak to the bathroom without my brother hearing me. As I stepped out, I heard the familiar grunting noise of my brother chasing me, along with the thudding footsteps getting louder and closer. I ran to the bathroom laughing and slammed the door. I sneaked out of the bathroom and walked to the kitchen to confront my brother. As I walked past the window in the living room, I looked out as my parents pulled into the parking space and out of the back seat. My brother got out. Bricks. Dozens of them. When I was a little kid, about 6 or 7, I had these reoccurring nightmares. I would dream I was running through the small forest near my house, which has a whole load of creepy shit of its own, but that's another story. And something would be after me. I would never see it, but I would feel it. And it was that horrible feeling of dread you get when you just know something is horrifically, completely wrong. I would be too terrified to even scream, and I would run down my street into my house, getting in through the front door just in time. Whatever was chasing me would then bang on the door hard enough to shake the entire door in its frame. And then, I would wake up. The thing is, I would wake up still hearing that thudding, loud enough that I could feel it in my chest. It would paralyze me with fear for several seconds. And then, I would scream for my mom, and usually she would come in and comfort me and say it was a dream, etc. However, one time, I woke up and heard it, and went to scream for her, but she was already running into my room, a look of complete terror on her face. Before I could tell her what was happening, she said to me, "Shh, stay quiet. I hear it too." This isn't from me directly. This is from my father. So, here it goes, X. My dad, 10 years old. My dad having a hard time sleeping. Maybe around 12 or 1 a.m., he says. His door creaks open, thinks it's his cat. He lets out his hand, hoping to pet his cat. Feels skin. Pulls hand away, frozen. Little moonlight that he had through his window shined on a green, naked, nearly no meat man on all fours by his bed. My dad stares at this thing for a good half hour. It's completely frozen. He eventually just remembers passing out at one point. It appears that this green man has been a part of my family since World War II era, at least the first recordings of it. The first recording of it was from my dad's side when they moved to America, and my super great-grandfather wrote a poem about seeing a green man staring at him within the brush and trees that surrounded his house. My big brother also had an experience where it talked to him. I've brought up the green man multiple times to him, but he shoves it off and changes the topic. I'm not sure how I feel about the green man, but all I know is that he is following my family. Nothing extraordinary, but here goes. 10 to 12 years old, told to take out trash. As I do so, see that the neighbor's cat is outside. Call cat up and pet and scratch it for a bit. Finish taking out the trash. Say it loud, "Good night, cat." Turn around and head inside. Hear an audible, "Good night, Anon." Freeze in tracks for a little. Decide to hurry on inside. I'm not sure whether someone was just fucking with me or not. I remember not seeing anyone outside when it happened, but I can't imagine another explanation. Be me, 7 years old. Wake up in middle of night and leave room to go sleep with mom because mommy's boy. Enter hallway and look at the staircase. There's a very tall man cloaked in darkness standing on the landing. He takes up so much space from floor to ceiling. Red eyes. I just stand there and start crying. Mom opens her door, and for a second, I was terrified that it might be another phantom. It's Mom. She calls me to her room and puts me to sleep. My sister says she saw the same thing, but while she was out with her friends. She died a few years after she told me this. About 16 years ago, living in a heavily wooded area with only one other neighbor who had a 2-story house. Share a room with older brother, we have bunk beds. Mine was the top one. The room was kind of built weird. The only window in it was kind of like a window that you would find in a basement, practically touching the ceiling, 6 to 7 feet above the ground inside, and 8 to 9 feet outside. One night I'm trying to sleep, but can't, and I just stare out the window since our bunk bed is pressed right against it. Suddenly, something starts furiously clawing at the window, and I swear, there was a tongue licking the glass all over. Get scared and hide, not wanting to make any sound. Tell parents in the morning, but they say it was probably just a tree branch. The nearest branch was at least 20 feet away, and that tree did not bend 90 degrees. Hurricane Isabel comes. We head to neighbor's house cause no power. Turns out, they only live on the second floor of their house. Makes me wonder if they've dealt with whatever that was. Didn't really think about it at the time, and never asked them because I was a wee one. Moved away not long after that. Mine isn't particularly scary, but I like these threads more than how to summon a suck you bitch. I'm not really much of a believer in paranormal stuff, but I had this weird experience at my grandma's house, and apparently I thought of it as a weird daydream. But my grandma affirmed it to me later. Be about 6 or 7, laying on my grandma's lap while we watch TV. Look up and see a huge red silhouette. It looked like a huge man, like 7 feet tall, and only maybe 6 feet away. It didn't have any features whatsoever, other than the skin seemed to be like white noise, only red in color instead. It had the shape of a person. For some reason, I was utterly calm. I stared at it for a solid 10 seconds before I tried to point at it to my grandma, who was watching TV. As I pointed at it, it turned to the left and stepped out of view, right as my grandma looked. I went into the room trying to find it, but didn't find anything. I tried to tell her more about what I saw, but not knowing how to describe white noise as a 6-year-old, and Power Rangers was a thing, I described it like the lightning in the Power Range transformation. She was confused and thought I meant that I saw a Power Ranger. Regardless, as a religious woman, she took me upstairs. I didn't know at the time, but she was scared. I can't remember the colors of the next 2, but I saw other figures wandering around the house. Unlike the red one, they never got as close. I tried to point them out to my grandma, but they appeared and left sight as quickly as I pointed. I saw one last one, more of a gray or black colored one, crossing my viewpoint. My mom came to pick me up after work, and my grandma, not wanting to scare my mom, said I was sick and would be better to stay home from school. I didn't know really, I guess, because of the event. Maybe even then I thought I was delusional. Apparently though, my grandma got shoved by one that I didn't see. I did see one more when I came back to school. It was blue in color. I thought it was watching me from the bushes, and it hid as soon as I took notice. When me and my cousins were kids, we saw something that sounds like what you're describing. We were playing outside and looked in the front door of the shed, and saw it standing in the back doorway. It's funny that you called it a Power Ranger because I'm pretty sure we said the same thing. We called it Red Man though. Never saw it up close, or saw it again. Every dream I had from the ages of 9 to 15 always had this man standing in the background. Never interacting with anything, always just looking at me. About a week after I turned 15, I had a dream where I was just walking down the street next to my junior high school with a friend. Of course, the man was in it, but it was different. He was doing something and he wasn't looking at me. He was walking down the same street, the opposite direction of me. When my friend saw him, she yelled, "Wow, that guy has really long arms." And I brought her next to me and covered her mouth. I turned around to look at him again, and his claws were dragging on the ground towards us. I began to say to my friend, "He's following us." But before I finished, he killed us. I had this same dream for a week. Then I went to my friend Joss's house. Joss and I always talked about our dreams. I don't know why, but we just did. We were creepy kids. He told me about this dream he had where his arms are extended and he has claws for hands. He's always just standing in the shadows in a world of darkness, staring at this kid. The kid acts as if there are other people and other things, but it's really just him and the kid in a world of darkness. He hates the kid and wants to kill him. In this final dream, he kills the kid and wakes up. I haven't talked to Joss since that night. When I was like 4 or 6 years old, I was having this walk with my granny. We were walking in a straight line down the long street, never making any turns or anything. As many minutes started passing by and we started venturing somewhere that I had no memory of, I finally said, "Grandma, I think we're lost. Shouldn't we go back now? It's been a long walk." I don't remember her exact response, but she essentially explained to me that the earth is round like a ball. This means that if you walk in a straight line long enough, you will end up where you started from. I thought that this was nonsense. My dad had told me that the earth was huge. It would take days for us to reach home like that. If we turned back, we would be home in about 1 to 2 hours, was what I was thinking, only to see our house in front of me seconds later. Oh, I guess that Granny was right after all. I still remember the eerie feeling back then, even after over 18 years. I felt like something was seriously off in the world. That something that wasn't supposed to happen, happened. But I was likely too young to fully comprehend the size of the world or geometry, so I brushed it off. When I was about 9 or 10, me and my parents lived in a small repurposed mill house in Gastonia, North Carolina. One out part of the country was hit by a nasty storm. Rather it was from a hurricane or just an on-land storm, I don't know. But it was serious. The wind was so bad that it had shattered at least one window with no projectile. The door on the back of the house was flying open and closed repeatedly. There were frequent lightning strikes close to the house. I don't know if there were any tornadoes that day, but the details are all fuzzy. But I remember, at some point during the storm, I went to the back door to look outside, and for about a second, I saw something standing in the backyard that looked like a massive black spider, about as tall as a child and wide. It looked like it had about 6 legs. It was black with white stripes on the legs. I saw this thing for a solid second or two before either I blinked or the door slammed again, and it was gone. It completely disappeared. I don't remember anything else, no more details, but I know that this wasn't a dream, because as I'm writing this, I asked my parents about the storm and they remember it clearly. They didn't see the spider-like shape that I described. Once, when I must have been about 4 years old, I was playing tag with my cousins at their house. It was nighttime and the house was mostly dark with our parents all sitting on the back porch, drinking beer and stuff. All the rooms in a house are linked by connecting doors, so if you had all the doors opened at once, you could walk all the way around the house in a large rectangular fashion. So we were running around the house and it becomes my turn to chase them. I was youngest and smallest, so they all got away pretty easily, leaving me alone towards the front of the house. As I'm chasing and going around the corner of first side room, I see a small figure move. couldn't have been more than 6 or so inches tall. Looked to have been made of stone, like something someone puts in their front yard as decoration. Like one of those little cherub gargoyle things, I guess. Anyways, I immediately stopped in my fucking tracks and watched it take a few steps towards the other, darker side of the room. It pauses and looks back at me, then walks into the shadows behind a door. It scared the shit out of me so bad that I ran back to my parents, crying. I thought I had seen a little baby angel or something. So, yeah, I was super young and all, so it's easy to chalk this all up to a child's imagination, but this shit is still really vivid in my memories. Pic related. My mom bought a doll from a yard sale when I was like 16, and it would bump around in the hall closet that she put it in. After a few months, she cleaned the closet out and had it sitting in a little chair in our living room. And one night I got up to go to the kitchen, and it was standing beside our couch, and as soon as I saw it, it casually fell over. Also, my friend stayed the night once, and we were asleep in the media room, and I woke up with it biting my finger. Like, seriously, a hard bite, and I screamed and my friend woke up and saw it hanging on my finger before dropping to the floor. Its mouth didn't even like open and close normally. It was just kind of like slightly parted so you could hold a toy bottle to it, or something. When I was about 8 years old, I woke up one night with a full bladder. I lived in a really old house that my dad bought cheap and spent years making livable, so it always creeped me out at night. I made my way downstairs through the living room, then kitchen, and into the bathroom. As I was pissing, I heard what sounded like a man's voice ask what I was doing awake so late at night. Half asleep, I responded to what I thought was my father as I tapped off the last few drops and left the bathroom. I expected to see him near the kitchen, but I was alone. Only a few seconds had passed since I clearly heard a man speak. I looked all over downstairs, sure that I would see him somewhere. Pretty soon, I realized there was nobody there, and I was alone. We lived pretty deep in the middle of the woods, and our kitchen had a pretty large window. I'd say it was about 6 foot tall, maybe 10 feet wide, looking over our backyard. I looked out the window, and what I saw scared the living hell out of me. Behind my house is the usual small backyard, followed by a creek and then a stretch of woods. And then really far out through the trees, you could see an open field. The field was not empty. There was a group of people, maybe 10 or 12 or so, and they seemed to be dancing in a circle, wearing all white. Based on the way they were moving, I think they were girls because they were sort of prancing around doing some sort of weird ritualistic dance. I watched them dance for a few minutes before running to my bed, confused, curious, and scared. That's pretty much my story. I would later find out that the town in which I lived had a fairly large Wiccan population. What always blew my mind wasn't just the voice, but it was that I both heard the voice and subsequently saw the figures dancing in the field.